Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Okay, so what I'm saying is an entire team of Babylon 5 fighters versus a Klingon bird of prey. Who would win?
Well, it depends on who the team is from the Babylon 5 fighters and who the team is on the Bird of Prey. Are we talking about the Revang or the Rataran?
We are not talking about General Martok's ship, okay?
Because Martok's going to take them out.
Yeah, obviously, but we know that the cloaking mechanism also was one of the issues that they faced, you know?
Yeah, okay. And then the Babylon 5 fighters have live rounds as opposed to phasers.
Yeah.
And live bullets will go through a force field.
Oh my God, they're multiplying. Welcome to episode 49 of Nerdery and Murdery.
A 49.
Such an idiot.
I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery. Welcome to another week. We're in studio again, so happy to be here and ready to learn about some nerdery and murdery for some hijinks and some low jinks.
Hijinks and low jinks.
Maybe even mid-links.
And we do have we have Zig's twin in the house, his mini-me, K3.
Nice to meet you, everybody.
So you heard her in the stab, so she may have some comments as we go along. But Zig, if you're ready, I will turn the show over to you.
Why, thank you, sir. Today we're going to talk about time travel conspiracies.
Outstanding.
There have been various accounts of persons who allegedly traveled through time reported by the press or circulated on the internet. These reports have turned out either to be hoaxes or to be based on incorrect assumptions. Incomplete information or interpretations of fiction as fact may be now recognized as urban legends. The first incident I want to talk about is the Moberly Jourdain incident, or also the ghosts of Petit Trianon de Versailles.
Glad you said it, not me.
Les fantômes du Trianon, les fantômes du Versailles.
Easy for you to say.
Not really, but it's a claim of time travel and hauntings made by Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain. In 1911, Moberly and Jourdain published a book entitled An Adventure under the names of Elizabeth Morrison and Frances Lamont. I think they use those names because they published them in English. Their book describes a visit they made to the Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the grounds of the Palace of Versailles, where they claimed to have seen the gardens as they had been in the late 18th century, as well as ghosts, including Marie Antoinette and others. Their story caused a sensation and was subject to much ridicule. Moberly and Jourdain recounted that they had decided to visit the Palais de Versailles as part of several trips around Paris, detailing how on the 10th of August, 1901, they traveled by train to Versailles. They remember not thinking much of the place after touring it, so they said they decided to walk through the gardens to the Petit Trianon. But after reaching the Grand Trianon, found it was closed to the public. They recollected traveling with a Baedeker guidebook and said that they became lost after missing a turn off the main avenue, Allée des Deux Trianons, and entered a lane where they bypassed their destination. Moberly reported that she noticed a woman shaking a white cloth out a window, while Jourdain recalled noticing an old deserted farmhouse outside of which was an old plow. At this point, they described a feeling of oppression and dreariness coming over them, after which men who they thought looked like palace gardeners told them to go straight on. Moberly described the men as very dignified officials dressed in long grayish-green coats with small three-cornered hats. Jourdain recalled that she noticed a cottage where a woman was holding a jug to a girl in the doorway, describing it as a tableau vivant, a living picture, much like Madame Tussaud's waxworks. Moberly did not observe the cottage, but remembers that she felt the atmosphere change. She wrote, "Everything suddenly looked unnatural, therefore unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like woodworked in tapestry. There were no effects of light and shade, and no wind stirred in the trees." The Comte de Vaudreuil would later suggest as a candidate for the man with the marked face, allegedly seen by Moberly and Jourdain. They reported reaching the edge of the woods close to the Temple l'Amour and coming across a man seated beside a garden kiosk wearing a cloak and large shady hat. Now, according to Moberly, his appearance was most repulsive. It expressed odiousness. His complexion was dark and rough. Jourdain noted the man slowly turned his face, which was marked by smallpox. His complexion was very dark. The expression was evil and yet unseeing. And though I did not feel that he was looking particularly at us, I felt a repugnance to going past him. They said another man whom they described as tall, with large dark eyes and crisp curling black hair under a large sombrero hat, came up to them and showed them the way to the Petit Trianon. A portrait of Marie Antoinette by Wertmuller, the figures that Moberly saw near the Petit Trianon, was claimed to bear resemblance to the Queen, as depicted in this painting. Moberly said she noticed a lady sketching on the grass who looked at them as they crossed the bridge to reach the gardens in front of the palace. She later described the lady as wearing a light summer dress and shady white hat with much fair hair. Moberly reported that she thought she was a tourist at first, but the dress appeared to be old-fashioned. Moberly came to believe that the lady was Marie Antoinette. Jourdain, however, did not see the lady. After the return to the palace, they reported that they were directed round to the entrance and joined a party of other visitors. They said that after they toured the house, they had tea at the Hotel de Reservoir before returning to Jourdain's apartment. So
it really sounds more paranormal
that's
than time travel.
Yeah, I wanted to include this one because it's the idea is they either saw a bunch of ghosts or they partially traveled in time.
Or maybe it was like some sort of formation of a tulpa, a being that is made out of thought energy.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. I didn't think about a tulpa.
Tulpa.
Chaplin's Time Traveler. So, in October 2010, Northern Irish filmmaker George Clark uploaded a video clip entitled Chaplin's Time Traveler to YouTube. The clip analyzed bonus materials in a DVD of the Charlie Chaplin film, The Circus. Included in the DVD is footage from the film's Los Angeles premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater in 1928. At one point, a woman is seen walking by holding up an object to her ear. Clark said that on a closer examination, she was talking into a thin black device that appeared to be a phone.
Yeah, that's the famous one where it looks like it's an iPhone or an Android that somebody's talking to in a Chaplin. Yeah.
Yes.
This one's actually quite famous.
Clark concluded that the woman who was possibly a time traveler. The clip received millions of hits and was the subject of television news stories. Nicholas Jackson, associated editor for The Atlantic, says its most likely answer is that she was using a portable hearing aid, a technology that was just being developed at the time. Philip Skroska, an archivist at the Bernard Becca Medical Library of Washington University in St. Louis, thought that the woman might have been holding a rectangular ear trumpet. The New York Daily News writer Michael Sheridan said the device was probably an early hearing aid, perhaps an acousticon manufactured by Miller Reese Hutchinson.
I could also state for the record that it could have just been spliced in, like on the DVD itself, just as a little joke by the editors.
Well, and so they've talked about that with this photograph. To my recollection, they have said it's not photoshopped, that the picture itself is real, that nothing was added to it.
They pulled it off an old nitrate print.
Right. So so you've got people who think it's a phone, but then you've got people who are like, no, this is a hearing piece.
And I can say that nitrate film, even with our modern digital recreations, we still can't quite get nitrate film correct. And they stopped using nitrate in the 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was explosive.
Right.
Yeah, honestly.
Extremely flammable.
Yeah, honestly, if you're watching a film and then a fire happens, you kind of might want to switch to a new media.
Good point. The hipster time traveler. Now, this is and I've included all of these photographs on our website too, so everybody can kind of take a look at it. A photograph from 1941 of genuine authenticity of the of the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia was alleged to show a time traveler. It was claimed that his clothes and his sunglasses were of the present day and not of the styles worn in the 1940s. Further research suggests that the present-day appearance of the man may not have been so new. The style of sunglasses first appeared in the 1920s. On first glance, the man is taken by many to be wearing a printed T-shirt, but on closer inspection, it seems to be a sweater with a sewn-on emblem, like a hockey sweater. The kind of clothing often worn by sports teams of the period. And it was in British Columbia. They did wear a lot of hockey jerseys. The shirt is very similar to the one used by the Montreal Maroons, which was an ice hockey team from that area. The remainder of clothing would appear to have been available at the time, though his clothes are far more casual than those worn by other individuals in the photograph. Debate centers on whether the image genuinely shows a time traveler or has been photoshopped and has been simply mistaken as anachronistic. The time-traveling hipster became a case study in viral internet phenomenon in museum, which was presented at the Museum of the Web 2011 conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, I have seen those hockey sweaters that they're talking about. They do not look like what that man is wearing. No, I think this picture is genuine.
Yeah, I've seen this picture too. It went viral for quite a long time. And I'm glad we're going to have the picture out on the website so people can see it.
Yeah.
Because it looks pretty genuine to me.
Yeah, and they can claim
but
they can claim that it was not photoshopped. Now, they did have sunglasses in the 1920s, but very few people owned them.
And sunglasses in the 1800s.
Yeah, but very few people used them.
Right.
Mostly people with eye injuries or light sensitivity. Sunglasses didn't really become a thing until what, the 50s?
For popular use, yeah.
Yeah, 50s, 60s, yeah. This one, the first story, not so much. I think they may have made it up. It is distinctly possible that they could have seen something. I'm not necessarily convinced, but this picture, the Chaplin film, I can kind of see that as being a square ear trumpet because I have seen those. They do appear to be close. I'm not 100% sure. On this one here, I don't know.
David Lynch had a square ear trumpet in Twin Peaks.
Yes. Yes, but not in 1920. The mobile device from 1943. A photograph from 1943 of genuine authenticity showing a scene of holidaymakers on Towan Beach in Newquay, Cornwall, was uploaded to Twitter in November 2018 by multimedia artist Stuart Humphreys, which was alleged by some viewers to show a time traveler operating an anachronistic mobile device, such as a phone. The tweet was picked up by news outlets including Fox News in the U.S. and various tabloid newspapers in the U.K., such as the Daily Mirror. Fueled by media websites such as Lad Bible, it gained global coverage via news outlets in Russia, Iran, Taiwan, Hungary, China, and Vietnam. Amongst others, Humphrey, the original uploader, was quoted in these stories as dismissing the time travel theory, stating the man in question was probably just rolling a cigarette.
Okay, all I gotta say is, with all these time travel people being caught by their phones, it's always because they're always on them.
The people are always on their phones. Have you, again, this is another one that I've uploaded to.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this one too.
Yeah.
I probably have seen all of the ones that we'll have pictures of. I've been fascinated. It's not hard to be fascinated with time travel. I mean, I grew up in the Back to the Future era.
Yes.
And so we were all fascinated with getting a DeLorean that we could travel through time on or in.
Right on. Yes, I want to get in it. Oh, you take the DeLorean. I want a TARDIS. Just because it's a nice place to live. Rudolph Fentz. Rudolph Fentz, also spelled Rudolph Finns, was a focal character of I'm Scared, a 1951 science fiction short story by Jack Finney, which was later reported as an urban legend, as if the events had truly happened. The story tells of the 19th century looking young man possessing items of the period who is found confused in the middle of Times Square in the 1950s, before being hit by a car and killed, suggesting that he had perhaps involuntarily time traveled about a century forward. The story of Rudolph Fentz became one of the most significant urban legends of the 1980s, has been repeated occasionally since, with the spread of the internet in the 1990s. It has been reported more often as a reproduction of facts and presented as evidence of the existence of time travel. Now, the Fentz legend describes how one evening in mid-June 1951 at about 11:15 p.m., passers-by at New York City's Times Square noticed a man of about 29 years of age, dressed in the fashion of the late 19th century. No one observed how he had arrived there, and he was disoriented and confused, standing in the middle of an intersection. He was hit by a taxi and fatally injured. Before people were able to intervene, the officials at the morgue searched his body and found the following items in his pocket: a copper token for a beer worth 5 cents bearing the name of a saloon which was unknown even to older residents of the area, a bill for the care of a horse and the washing of a carriage drawn by a livery stable on Lexington Avenue that was not listed in any address book, about $70 in old banknotes, business card with the name Rudolph Fentz and an address on Fifth Avenue, a letter sent to this address in June 1876 from Philadelphia, and a medal for coming in third in a 3-legged race. None of these objects showed any signs of aging. Captain Hubert V. Rim of the Missing Persons Department of NYPD tried using the information to identify the man. He found that the address on Fifth Avenue was part of a business. Its current owner did not know Rudolph Fentz. Fentz's name was not listed in the address books. His fingerprints were not recorded anywhere, and no one had reported him missing. Rim continued to investigate and finally found a Rudolph Fentz Jr. in a telephone book from 1939. Rim spoke to the residents of the apartment building at the listed address who remembered Fentz and described him as a man of about 60 years who had worked nearby. After his retirement, he moved to an unknown location in 1940. Contacting the bank, Rim was told that Fentz died 5 years before, but his widow was still alive and lived in Florida. Rim contacted her and learned that her husband's father, Rudolph Fentz Sr., had disappeared in 1876, age 29, and he'd left the house for an evening walk and never returned. All efforts to locate him were in vain and no trace remained. Captain Rim checked the missing person file on Rudolph Fentz in 1876. The description of his appearance, age, and clothing corresponded precisely to the appearance of the unidentified dead man from Times Square. The case was still marked unsolved, fearing he would be held mentally incompetent. Rim never noted the results of his investigation to the official files.
Could you imagine accidentally time traveling when you walk out your house and then you're in an intersection and then you get hit by a car?
Well, this is another one that I've heard before, and some people claim it's false. They claim it sounds awful lot like a story that was I think it was published somewhere in the 50s called "I'm Scared."
Yeah.
People say that's awfully close to that. So
Yeah, but there was a report that the guy that wrote "I'm Scared" wrote the story after hearing this.
right, I've heard that too. That he based his story on these events.
It also does remind me of stories of the Fae or the fairies of Ireland. You know, they would oftentimes take people to their realm of never sleeping, always moving, and they would come back years later perfectly as they were just then. So maybe, who knows? The fairies were actually just time travelers being funny and taking people to like nightclubs and stuff.
Just to mess with their minds.
Yeah.
Like the character in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy who was immortal who would go down to a planet and walk in front of him.
Wowbagger, the infinitely prolonged, I think.
Yeah. He would walk back and forth making beep beep noises because it made him happy.
Beep, beep.
Next is John Titor.
I am very familiar with John Titor.
John Titor is a pseudonym used on several bulletin boards during 2000 and 2001 by a poster claiming to be an American military time traveler from 2036. Titor made numerous vague and specific predictions regarding calamitous events in 2004 and beyond, including a nuclear war, but inconsistencies in his explanations, the uniform inaccuracies of his predictions, and a private investigator's finding all led to the general impression that the entire episode was an elaborate hoax. A 2009 investigation claimed that Titor was likely the creation of Larry Haber, a Florida entertainment lawyer, along with his brother Maury, a computer scientist. The first posts using John Titor's military symbols appear on the Time Travel Institute forums on November 2nd, 2000, under the name Time Traveler _0. At the time, the name John Titor was not being used. The post discussed time travel in general, the first one being 6-part descriptions of what a time machine would need to have to work. And responses to questions about how such a machine would work. Early messages tend to be short. A second thread was also made due to shortcomings in the forum software at the time. The name John Titor was not introduced until January of 2001, when Time Traveler _0 began posting on the Art Bell BBS forum, which required a name or pseudonym for every account. The Titor posts ended in late March 2001. Around 2003, various websites reproduced Titor's posts, rearranging them into narratives. Not all refer to the original dates posted. I remember reading this with you.
Yes, because I was the one that told you about it.
That's
because
right.
I found the bulletin board material on this, and I was fascinated by it. Fascinated following as he would talk to people, because people would ask him questions, and he would respond back. He was here in our time to get a very specific IBM computer, which had the ability to fix some bug they had in the future, and for whatever reason they couldn't rebuild it in the future. He talked about that there had been another civil war, but they were past that and things were peaceful. That most big cities had crumbled, and it was now more smaller, tight knit communities. It was very, very interesting to read.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people talked about how after the end of the post, when you finally got the whole story, a lot of people realized that what he was doing was recreating the story of Stand on Zanzibar, which was a novel.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Stand on Zanzibar, them living in Florida, the tight-knit communities. Basically, the idea is that everybody in the world could live. If we took everybody in the world that could live on this one piece of land, and I want to say it was either New Zealand or Australia, but after this calamitous event, everybody could fit on Zanzibar, which is why the novel was titled "Stand on Zanzibar."
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's he cribbed a lot of his stuff. Not the time travel information, but the stories of his society was cribbed a lot from Stands on Zanzibar.
Well, the John Titor story was very well done.
Yes,
it
was fascinating.
Very easy to see how people could fall into it and believe that he was really a time traveler from a near future. Because he had even talked about that he really couldn't give details of what would happen in the future because that could make things not happen in the future. That, it could be he talked about whole different timelines and everything like that. It was just really, it was cool. Regardless of whether it was fake, whether it was not, the John Titor story was cool.
Yeah. Well, and it was the IBM 5100 was what he needed. But weren't those kind of common before 2000? I mean, weren't those more common in the 80s and the 90s than they were in, say, 2000?
I don't remember.
I'd like to think that he really just messed up on the time and just couldn't go back, and he was like, crap.
Well, I mean, we eventually it was proven that it was a hoax.
Right.
But the reason I included this is because it spawned a lot of ideas. It is believed that we have actually recreated time travel now at CERN for subatomic particles.
Right.
Not for people.
Right.
And it's a millisecond.
Right.
Yes. But some of the ideas for the time travel that he used, those guys kind of went on that idea. So it's 2 magnetic housing units for dual microsingularities, an electron injection manifold to alter mass and gravity of the microsingularities, a cooling and X-ray venting system, gravity sensors on variable gravity lock, 4 main cesium clocks, and 3 main computer units is what he used. And according to the Post, the device was installed in the rear of a 1966 Chevrolet Corvette convertible. The Post later mentioned a 1987 truck with 4-wheel drives. Now, I remember the truck, and it was fitted out with the pieces and things because they were on the websites where they showed pictures of it.
And he had drawings of the actual time control units too.
Yeah. Now, he did invoke the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, whereby events from his timeline may differ from our own.
Right.
Titor also expressed assurances that the difference were minimal. As such, his descriptions have been interpreted as predictions and compared with historical events since 2001. The most immediate of Titor's predictions were an upcoming civil war in the United States having to do with order and rights. He described it as beginning in 2005 with civil unrest surrounding the presidential elections of that year. Boy, was he close to the mark.
Yeah.
He described it, the civil conflict that he characterized as having a Waco-type event every month that steadily gets worse would be pretty much at everyone's doorstep and erupt by 2008. Again, his predictions weren't necessarily wrong. They were just about 10 years off.
Sure.
As a result of the war, the United States would split into 5 regions based on various factors and differing military objectives. The Civil War, according to Titor, would end in 2015 with a brief but intense World War III. Titor refers to the exchange as End Day. Washington, D.C. and Jacksonville, Florida are specifically mentioned as being hit. After the war, Omaha, Nebraska would be the new U.S. capital. Titor was vague at the exact motivations and causes of the World War III, and at one point he characterized the hostilities as being led by border clashes and overpopulation. He also pointed to the contemporary conflicts between Arab and Israel as not a cause, but rather a milestone that precedes the hypothetical World War III. He claimed that the 13-year-old in 2011, he joined the Fighting Diamondbacks, a shotgun infantry unit in Florida, for at least 4 years. In other posts, he described himself as hiding from the war. Titor claimed that the Everett Wheeler model of quantum physics, better known as the many worlds interpretation, was correct. According to Titor, this caused a new time stream to form because of his time travels. This makes his predictions non-falsifiable, since believers can say that the events were averted by Titor's posting. And that's about all I have for John Titor. But I figured you wanted to talk about this guy a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did, because I spent a lot of time on those boards as he was posting, because I was there live as he was doing it. And it was fascinating. It was extremely. Extremely so. And I remember sitting there reading it and thinking to myself, no, this is fake. This is fake. It's fun. It's interesting.
Yeah,
There's no way this is real.
It's a damn good story, though.
It was. And it was great to follow along as he talked about the various things. I can admit there were times where
it was I don't know, he could be right.
Right.
This was probably one of the first alternative reality games you guys probably participated in, because it's simply like a multimedia platform thing where you look for clues and go through different websites and stuff. That's just what it kind of sounds like to me.
No, this was really it was message boards, and you didn't have to go to various sites. It was it had a centralized message board where people would post to him, he would post back. He was talking about when he would be leaving soon. That he visited his family, and his family were aware of that he was from the future, and it was, like I said, as I sat there reading through it, fairly certain that it was fake, it was still intriguing enough to make you question it and go, but what if?
What if?
What
Maybe
if this
not.
is real?
And I would say that the thing that you're talking about, I think they may have got some ideas from this guy, because this is what, 2000 and 2001? This is about,
It's in time
about the
genre.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. We were keeping up with it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was really, really cool.
You can still read all about John Titor.
You can read the whole story.
I think it's johntitor.com is out there, and you can read the whole thing and see it as we went through it. And now, of course, it's been verified as a hoax.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Read through it because it's an interesting read.
Bob White or Tim Jones is my next story.
Okay.
Similar to John Titor, Bob White or Tim Jones sent an unknown number of spam emails onto the internet between 2001 and 2003. The subject of the emails was always the same, that an individual was seeking to find someone who could supply a dimensional warp generator. In some instances, he claimed to be a time traveler stuck in 2003. In others, he claimed to be seeking the parts only from other time travelers. Several recipients began to respond in kind, claiming to equipment such as the requested dimensional warp generator. One recipient, Dave Hill, set up an online shop for which the time travelers purchased the warp generator, which was formerly a hard drive motor. While another Dave charged thousands of dollars for time traveling courses before he would sell the requested hardware. The name Bob White was taken from an alias, and the second Dave used when responding, a reference to Bob White's of Trixie Bedlam fame. Soon afterwards, the time traveler was identified as professional spammer Robert J. Todino, known as Robbie. Todino's attempt to travel in time were a serious belief, and while he believed he was perfectly mentally stable, his father was concerned for those replying to his emails had been preying on Todino's psychological problems. In the book Spam Kings, journalist Brian S. McWilliams, who had originally uncovered Todino's identity from Wired magazine, revealed that Todino had been previously diagnosed with dissociative disorder and schizophrenia, explaining that the psychological problems of which his father had spoken. Todino's time travel were referenced in the song Rewind by jazz trio Groove Lily on their 2003 album, Are We There Yet? The song used phrases from Todino's emails within its lyrics. Michael McIntosh. Michael McIntosh believed he had seen the future timeline where he is a U.S. commander-in-chief. This is the lawyer.
The lawyer in Seattle.
Yeah. Revealing the bizarre news in a video, the time traveler claimed he had been to Mars at the age of 5 and had numerous psychic abilities. The supposed time traveler, I could see you giggling over there. The supposed time traveler worked alongside former U.S. President Barack Obama on a top-secret time-traveling operation. Speaking to paranormal investigators from YouTube channel Apex TV, McIntosh said the mission gave him access to technology dubbed Chronovision.
That sounds like a very bad cyberpunk video game.
Andrew Carlson was supposedly arrested in March 2003 for SEC violations for making 126 high-risk stock trades and being successful on every one. As reported, Carlson stated with an initial investment of $800 and ended with over $350 million, which drew the attention of the SEC. Later reports suggest that after his arrest, he submitted a 4-hour confession where he claimed to be a time traveler from 200 years in the future. He offered to tell the investigators such thing as the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden and the cure for AIDS in return for a lesser punishment and to be allowed to return to his time craft. Although he refused to tell investigators the location and workings of his craft, a mysterious man posted his bail, and Carlson was scheduled for court hearing, but was never seen again. Records show that he never existed. The Carlson story likely originated as a fictional piece in Weekly World News, a satirical newspaper, and was later reported by Yahoo News, where its fictitious nature became less apparent. It was soon reported by other newspapers and magazines as fact. This in turn drove word-of-mouth spread through email inboxes and internet forums, leading to far more detailed descriptions of events. I am sorry, that is not the guy I was thinking of. I've got him further down in the notes. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Because the Seattle guy is very interesting.
Yeah, the Seattle guy's a real guy. But yeah, they're saying that this Carlson guy never really existed. It started in Weekly World News, but it's interesting. It's verifiable. We can go and look up SEC violations, right? Mm-hmm. I think we can do that, right?
And we can see the fact that they did that.
Yeah.
Which either he's very actually got that ability, or even better yet, he just kind of did the math in his head and liked to make up a fake reason.
Yeah, it's math in your head, where in some cases it's illegal. Vegas. It's illegal to do, or it is frowned upon to do math in your head.
Yes.
In Vegas.
A video uploaded in 2006 shows a Swedish man named Harken Nordqvist claiming that he had been accidentally transported to 2046 when attempting to fix the sink in his kitchen. There in the future, he immediately met someone who revealed and proved to be himself about 70 years old, and with whom he had a great time. He filmed a short footage of the two smiling and hugging each other and showing the tattoo that they had on their right arms. The story was a marketing campaign promoted the pension plans of the insurance company AMF. iPhone in 1860 painting. Some online viewers claim that an 1860 painting by Austrian artist Ferdinand George Waldemüller, titled The Expected One, allegedly depicts a woman holding and staring down at an iPhone while strolling along a path in the countryside. However, art experts debunked these claims, saying the alleged iPhone the woman was holding in the painting was actually a prayer book.
You know what? It's always because she's on that damn prayer book.
On that damn prayer book. Now I want to talk about the guy in Seattle. And my notes are gone. We may have to cut this bit out. I am so sorry. I had notes on the guy in Seattle.
And then it deleted.
Oh my God. This is like the best one, too.
Yeah, I know. So I read through them several times. So basically, this guy in Seattle claimed that he had been involved in a time travel experiment, and he had moved. He had found out that he would become president.
So so what it is he claims to have been in a government-backed organization since he was very young. He was with groups of people that were picked very young, and that they were sent to time travel. And basically, what he described was like a Stargate kind of thing that they went through. We'll have to look this up because there are pictures that he claims were him at the surrender of the Civil War. There's a picture that he claims is him, and if you look at it, it looks like the kid could be him, and it does look like the person is that their clothing is a little out of time for that.
It's close, but not.
It's close, but I think there may have been sneakers and whatnot. But yeah, I wish we had more on this because
I'm so sorry.
No, as this guy goes on, he's actually run for president twice because he has been told that he is going to be the president of the United States. He's a lawyer in Seattle. This is a real guy.
Yeah, he's a practicing lawyer. He has his credentials. This is not a crackpot.
Well, okay.
This is okay. This is not a crackpot in his personal life.
And his name is Andrew Basaggio.
Basaggio.
Basago, right? He's publicly claimed that from the time he was 7 until he was 12, he participated in Project Pegasus. I knew there was a project that went on this, which was a secret government program that he says he worked on teleportation and time travel under the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA.
DARPA.
Right, DARPA, which is a real agency.
Yes, it is.
He said that they trained children along with adults so they could test the mental and physical effects of time travel on kids. And children have an advantage over adults in terms of adapting to the strains of moving between the past, present, and future.
Because their brains are still developing.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Correct.
That's a interesting supposition.
Correct. So yeah, I wish I could give you more on this. He said he experienced 8 different time travel technologies during his stint in the program. Mostly, they included a teleporter based on technical papers supposedly found in pioneering mechanical engineer Nikola Tesla's New York City apartment after his death in 1943. So they're saying that they took from his technology.
From Tesla stuff?
Yeah. So sorry, I had to.
No, I'm glad you
Google.
did. I am so glad you did. So we will do another time traveling episode on Project Pegasus itself.
Yeah, I mean that's an entire segment in itself that we could cover heavily, and it's the one that I am most interested in because there is a ton of information out there about Project Pegasus. So sorry your notes disappeared, but I was able to Google real quick.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, because as you can see here, they were supposed to be in this big blank spot right there.
Maybe it was the time travelers.
Maybe it was the time travelers.
Maybe they took it out because they didn't want us to have it.
Yeah, right on. Okay. And, well, that about does it for the nerdery today. I feel so dumb. Thank you for being here for my big screw-up, K3.
Oh, no, it's not a problem.
Outstanding. Well, that's all part of the light side of the house, but then we get to turn over to the dark side, so I guess I'll take over for the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
So for today, I got my sources from the Daily Record, the Sunday Times, the Herald, and Wikipedia, and today we're going to be talking about Bible John.
Bible John.
So, over 50 years ago, police in Glasgow, Scotland began the task of piecing together the evidence they hoped would lead to the killer of young mother Patricia Docker. What police didn't realize then, but the discovery the day before of the nurse's naked and lifeless body in a lane on the south side of the city would be the first of 3 murders attributed to Bible John. For over half a century, the murders which shocked Scotland have been thought to be the work of a solitary male. And one of the reasons this case may be unsolved is from multiple missteps along the way from police. Between the years of 1968 and 1969, 3 young women were murdered in Glasgow, Scotland after attending the Barrowland Ballroom. And I've heard the story of Bible John in 3 different podcasts, and I wanted to cover it myself. And I don't know why, but the Barrowland Ballroom makes me think of Shadowrun. I don't know why, but every time I hear it, I think of Shadowrun.
It sounds like what the English used to call a palais, or it's a affectation of the word palace or palais, where they would have these dance halls.
And that's what this was. This was a dance hall.
I like to think of that one scene from The Labyrinth when the Goblin King and the girl are dancing together.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although it was quickly established these murders were the work of just one man, there were no clues left behind at the scene to indicate who the murderer could be. There have been a number of suspects over the years, and one man in particular was at the top of the suspect list. However, Bible John's true identity has never been uncovered, and the case remains a mystery to this day. On the 23rd of February 1968, the naked body of 25-year-old auxiliary nurse Patricia Docker was found in the doorway of a lockup garage by a man who was on his way to work at Carmichael Place in Battlefield, Glasgow. The location of her body was only yards from her home at Langside Place.
Oh, no.
Her body bore the evidence of extensive blunt force trauma, particularly to the face and the head, and she had been strangled to death with a strong ligature, probably a belt. Patricia's handbag, watch, and clothes were missing from the crime scene, and her clothing was never found, although her handbag was later recovered by the River Cart by an underwater search unit, and her watch was recovered from a pool of water close to the murder scene. There were extensive door-to-door inquiries in the area, and it did produce a witness who recalled hearing a female scream, "Leave me alone," the previous evening, but little hard evidence was discovered at the scene. Nonetheless, an ambulance worker who retrieved the body informed investigators the victim had been a nurse who worked at Mearnskirk Hospital in nearby Renfrewshire.
He knew her?
The ambulance worker did, yes.
Oh.
That's
Consequently, the victim was formally identified by her father the following day. Patricia was a married mother of one, estranged from her husband. The night of her murder, she informed her parents she would spend the evening dancing at the Majestic Ballroom in Hope Street, although for unknown reasons she had chosen to spend the majority of her evening at the I'm having a problem pronouncing this one. The Barrowland Ballroom.
The Barrowland Ballroom?
And most likely she was there because they had a over 25 night, which the venue hosted every Thursday.
Yeah, the other one was probably dead.
Could have been.
Yeah.
well, dead.
When she failed to return home that evening, her parents assumed she had spent the night with a friend. Police inquiries would only determine several days later that late in the evening, Patricia had left the Majestic Ballroom to attend the Barrowland, where she had probably encountered the killer. This is one of the missteps that the police had done, is they weren't putting together that she was at the Barrowland.
They thought she was at the Majestic.
Correct.
Okay.
A post-mortem conducted by Gilbert Forbes at the University of Glasgow's medical school confirmed that the cause of death had been strangulation and that Patricia's body bore no evidence of sexual assault. It was discovered, however, that Patricia was menstruating at the time of her death. Furthermore, the state of rigor mortis upon her body at the time of discovery indicated she had likely died shortly after she had left the Barrowland Ballroom. Investigators surmised the perpetrator had likely grabbed Patricia before repeatedly punching her and kicking her in the face as she twice screamed, "Leave me alone." He then proceeded to rape Patricia before strangling her to death and leaving her naked body with nothing but one shoe nearby, close to the doorway of the lockup garage at Carmichael Place.
Like Cinderella.
So, and this is another thing. Investigators are saying that she was raped, but the postmortem says she was not sexually assaulted. So it's conflicting evidence here.
Yeah, which is it?
I don't know. And so the confused cops, they initially concentrate on the Hope Street venue for the first 3 days, costing them precious time, which hampered the investigation. And ultimately they drew a blank because they were focusing on the street and they didn't go back to the ballroom. On Saturday, August 16th, 1969, a 32-year-old mother of three named Jemima McDonald also opted to attend the Barrowland Ballroom to spend the evening dancing. She was a regular of the Barrowland, and per family custom, her sister, Margaret O'Brien, took care of her three children in her absence. As midnight approached, she was seen by several people in the company of a young, well-dressed, and well-spoken man of slim build, aged between 25 and 35 and between 6 feet and 6 feet 2 in height. He had short, dark brown hair with fair streaks and likely spoke with a distinctive Glaswegian accent and occasionally inserted brief biblical quotations into his conversation.
Hence Bible John.
Jemima was last seen leaving the Barrowland shortly after midnight on the 17th of August in the company of this individual and was last seen walking towards either Main Street or Landrecy Street in the direction of her home at approximately 12:40 a.m. Her sister Margaret became concerned when Jemima failed to return home, and later that same day she began hearing local rumors that young children had been seen leaving a derelict tenement building in McKee Street discussing a body in the premises. By Monday morning, Margaret was so concerned that she herself, fearing the worst, walked into the old building, and there she discovered her own sister's extensively battered body lying face down with her shoes and stockings lying beside her. A post-mortem concluded that Jemima had been raped and extensively beaten, particularly about the face, before she had been strangled to death with one of her own stockings. The murder occurred approximately 30 hours before her body had been discovered. Unlike Patricia, the body of Jemima was fully clothed, although her underclothing had been torn, and like Patricia, she had been menstruating at the time of her death.
This guy has a type.
A really, really specific, kind of gross type.
Mm-hmm. Police inquiries into Jemima's movements on the night of her murder produced several eyewitnesses who were able to accurately describe the man with whom she had been in the company at the Barrowland. Door-to-door inquiries on McKeith Street also produced a woman who remembered hearing female screams on the evening of Jemima's murder, although this individual could not recall the precise time, so consequently police considered this of little information to their inquiry. Although the city of Glasgow police noted several striking similarities between the murders of Patricia and Jemima, including that both women had attended the Barrowland Ballroom on the evening of their murders, been beaten before being strangled to death with a ligature, were menstruating, and had their handbags taken from the crime scene, initially both murders were not considered to be the work of the same perpetrator. Despite extensive appeals, the investigation into the murder of Patricia had quickly become a cold case. Police had little information owing to both a lack of witnesses and hard evidence. The investigation had also been severely hindered by investigators not discovering until 3 days after her death that Patricia had attended the Barrowland on the evening of her murder. 18 months later, following the discovery of Jemima, police became aware of remarkable similarities to the murder of Patricia.
A year and a half later?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did both case files just drop out of their hands and they're like, whoa, hold on, wait a minute, like a sort of Indiana Jones type situation, or like, I just wanted to know what they thought at that time.
Well, police at this time did not conclusively link both murders to the same perpetrator, but they couldn't completely discount the theory either. In addition, police were certain that the perpetrator or perpetrators held a high degree of local geographical knowledge. However, they may have been a stranger to the district, as none of the eyewitnesses with whom investigators conversed directly knew the man or men seen in the company of either woman prior to their murder. For the first time in a Scottish murder hunt, a composite drawing of the man with whom Jemima had last been seen alive had been given to the press, being widely distributed via both newspapers and upon television throughout Scotland in efforts to identify the suspect. Also, both male and female undercover officers began performing discreet surveillance at the Barrowland Ballroom in efforts to identify the suspect. Police surveillance at the Barrowland Ballroom would be terminated in late October 1969 due to the initiative failing to produce any suspects, and the proprietors of the Barrowland also blamed detectives for their sharp decrease in attendance figures.
Couldn't have been the murder. Could not have been the murder.
Now, on October 31st, 1969, there was a man walking his dog who discovered the body of 29-year-old Helen Puddock behind a tenement on Earl Street in the Scotstoun district of Glasgow. Her body was found beside a drain pipe in the back of her Earl Street flat. She had been stripped partially naked, extensively beaten about the face before being raped, and then strangled to death with one of her own stockings. The contents of her handbag had been scattered close to her body, although the handbag itself was missing from the crime scene, as were the others. Grass and weed stains upon the soles of Puddock's feet and shoes indicated that she had engaged in a ferocious struggle with her killer. She had evidently at one point attempted to scale a nearby railway embankment. Her body also bore a deep bite mark on her upper right thigh, and as with the case of the previous two victims, Helen had been menstruating at the time of her murder.
Did she have children as well?
I don't remember. I don't think she had children. I don't recall that she had children.
Okay.
The evening prior to the murder, Helen and her sister Jean Langford had been to the Barrowland Ballroom, where both had become acquainted with two men, both named John. One of these individuals said he worked as a slater and resided in Castlemilk, while the other individual had been a well-spoken man who did not disclose where he actually lived. After being in the company of these two individuals for more than an hour, all four left the Barrowland to head home. The man named John, who had been Jean's dance partner, walked to George Square to board a bus, while Jean, Helen, and the man who had been Helen's dance partner hailed a taxi. So the trio set off from Glasgow Cross, making a 20-minute westward journey towards Jean's Knightswood home, where she left the taxi and then continued towards Helen's home in Scotstoun. During conversations between the trio on this journey, most of the crucial information pertaining to the killer's profile became apparent. Jean later informed detectives that her sister's companion had been a teetotal individual who repeatedly quoted from Old Testament stories of Moses during the time that she and her sister had conversed with him in a taxi. He had also referred to the Barrowland as a, quote, adulterous den of iniquity, and of his disapproval of married women visiting the premises as they retrieved their coats at the end of the evening. Gene had also gotten out of the taxi at Kelso Street before seeing the vehicle turn towards Earl Street. The suspect was described by Gene as being a tall, slim, and well-dressed man with reddish or fair hair rounded neatly in the back, aged between 25 and 30, and approximately 5'10" in height. The individual had given his name as either John Templeton, John Simpleton, or John Emerson, and he had been a polite and well-spoken individual, having frequently quoted from the Old Testament during the trio's taxi ride home, although he said he was neither a Catholic nor a Protestant. Jean would also state to investigators that it had become increasingly clear to her as the trio had ridden in the taxi that this man had considered her presence in the vehicle to be an inconvenience. At one point during this ride, he had explained to the women the reason he refrained from consuming alcohol was due to his being conditioned by a strict parental attitude before stating, "I don't drink at Hogmanay, I pray." I had to look that up. Hogmanay is the Scottish New Year. I didn't know. He had also alluded to his father's belief that dance halls were dens of iniquity, with any married woman who frequented these premises as being adulterous by nature. And although Gene had informed detectives that the man accompanied Helen had been a slim, tall individual who had been dressed in well-cut brown Reed and Taylor brand suit and who smoked embassy cigarettes, she also recalled him mentioning that he had been familiar with several drinking premises in the Yorker district of Glasgow and that he had one stage worked in a laboratory. She would also recall distinct facial features of this man, such as having overlapping front teeth. However, bouncers at the Barrowland Ballroom dismissed much of this description, claiming the man had been a short, well-spoken individual with black hair. At this point, the Scottish media had now nicknamed the suspect Bible John due to Gene's reports of biblical testimony of the suspect, and police now thought that they had a serial killer on the loose. The last possible sighting of the suspect was made by both driver and conductor on a night service bus who noticed a young man matching the description given by Langford boarding a bus at the junction of Dumbarton Road and Gray Street at approximately 2 a.m. on October 31st. He was in a particularly disheveled state with mud stains on his jacket and a livid red mark on his cheek just beneath one eye. Both witnesses also recalled his repeatedly tucking a short cuff of one sleeve into his jacket. A man's cufflink had been found alongside the body of Helen. This individual was last seen walking towards the public ferry to cross the River Clyde to the south side of the city. The murder of Helen had remarkable similarities to the previous two murders, further raising suspicions that all three murders had been committed by the same person. Here's your answer. Each of the victims had been the mother of at least one child and had met her murder at the Barrowland Ballroom. So Helen apparently did have a child. I'm sorry, I did not have that earlier.
Yeah, well, I figured it sounds like that's part of his profile.
The handbag of each woman was missing. Each victim had been strangled to death, and at least two of these women had been raped prior to the murders. In addition, each of the three women had been escorted home by her killer and murdered within yards of her doorstep, and all had been menstruating at the time of death. Each had a sanitary napkin or tampon placed upon, beneath, or near her body, leading to the speculation that the women had been murdered for their refusal to engage in intercourse with their murder excused by their periods. Within hours of discovery of the body of Helen, an additional composite drawing of the suspect was created using the detailed description provided by her sister. Jean saw the earlier image created after the murder of Jemima MacDonald and believed it was an excellent likeness. Detective Superintendent Joe Beatty asked the public to closely study this composite drawing should it resemble anyone they knew. And due to the suspect's hair being unfashionably short for the area, over 450 hairdressers in and around Glasgow were shown the updated drawing of the suspect, and all dentists around the city were asked to examine their records to determine if they held records of a male patient with overlapping incisors and a missing tooth in the upper right jaw. Both of these proved fruitless. Got nothing from it.
Actually, the thing with the hairdressers is a really smart idea. Because, late 60s, early 70s, everybody had shaggy hair. Everybody. Unless you were in the military, you had shaggy hair.
Right.
And also, it does lead to some issues like that, because nowadays they do that all the time. So there was this one guy who got arrested in the middle of his haircut. He had a big fro, and half of it was near shaved to his head. So it looked really ridiculous.
Yeah. They're going with the hairdressers. Yeah, the guy has a weird haircut, so it's
Right.
easy to spot him. Yeah.
Well, police also produced an artist impression portrait created by Lennox Patterson, who was the registrar of the Glasgow School of Art, based on the recollection of Puttock's sister. And in June 1970, police employed a photo fit system in order to attempt to produce a better likeness of the suspect. This was the first instance this method of identifying a murder suspect was utilized in Scotland.
Nice.
More than 100 detectives were assigned to work full-time on the case, and 50,000 witness statements would be taken in subsequent door-to-door inquiries. Ultimately, more than 5,000 potential suspects would be questioned in the first year in the inquiry alone, and Jean Langford would be required to attend over 300 identity parades, although she was adamant none of the individuals required to participate in these identity parades had been the individual with whom she had last seen her sister, and all would be cleared of any involvement. Fearing that the perpetrator would strike again, a team of 16 detectives was instructed to mingle with dancers at all dance halls in Glasgow. In particular, these detectives frequented the Barrowland on Thursday and Saturday nights at the Over 25 events, where each victim was presumed to have met her murderer. Despite the extensive manhunt, no further developments would arise, and the investigation into these three murders eventually became cold, with many officers assigned to the case believing that the perpetrator had either died, been jailed for an unrelated offense, been incarcerated in a mental hospital, or that senior police officer had known his actual identity but had been unable to prove he had committed the murders. Others speculated that he may have simply moved away from the Glasgow district or murdered wherever in the vicinity. This possibility prompted police to circulate multiple copies of the composite drawing at all British Army, Navy, and Air Force bases in the United Kingdom, Europe, and the Middle and Far East. But this potential line of inquiry failed to produce any significant leads either. So who were the potential suspects? First, we had John White. One former Detective Chief Inspector Les Brown, who was working with the Strathclyde police, had supplied current investigators with the details of the arrest of a suspect conducted in 1969, which he believes was of an extremely likely perpetrator, but was dismissed when he simply because he did not have noticeably overlapping front teeth. According to Brown, the man's arguing with a young woman in the Barrowland ballroom immediately prior to his arrest had greatly raised investigators' concerns, yet this suspect was released from custody despite the fact that he had closely resembled the facial composite and had subsequently supplied police with a false name and address before revealing his true name and address in the Gorbals. Brown said that the simple fact of this particular suspect not having notably overlapping front teeth, despite one police sergeant's acknowledgement of his being this being the best suspect yet, was sufficient enough for ordering his release. Several years later, Brown spoke at length to a detective who had taken the same man to a hospital after arresting him outside the Barrowland ballroom at the time of the murders. Although the suspect needed several stitches in his head following an altercation, as soon as his handcuffs had been released, he escaped from the hospital. At the time of this incident, this individual had also falsely given his name to medical personnel as John White. In addition to this basic circumstantial evidence, the whole demeanor of the man had led Les Brown and several of his colleagues to believe he may have been the perpetrator. However, after Brown wrote of his suspicions of this individual in his 2005 autobiography, he came forward and offered to provide a DNA sample in order to clear his name, and so this eliminated him as a suspect. There was an anonymous Netherlands resident. In 1983, an unidentified man contacted Strathclyde police. This individual claimed to conclusively know that his friend had been Bible John, adding that both he and his friend had been raised in the Cranhill district of Glasgow, and both had frequented the Barrowland Ballroom in the 1960s. He claimed, read an article in the Evening Times 5 years previously before suddenly realizing his friend had been the perpetrator of the murders. The alleged suspect was traced living in the Netherlands, married to a Dutch woman, but nothing more was ever heard from the claimant or the reputed suspect. So we don't know on that one. The Hannah Martin rapist. So in the years after the Bible John killings, a number of women came forward to claim that they had been sexually assaulted after an evening at the Barrowland. One of these women, Hannah Martin, claimed that she had been assaulted and raped by Bible John and had subsequently gave birth to his child at the Glasgow Royal Maternity Hospital in January 1970, which was a daughter she named Isabel. In April 1969, Martin had gone to the Barrowland. She ended up leaving the dance hall in the company of a tall man with whom she had sex. Martin then accepted his offer of a lift home. However, during the drive, the man's sexual demeanor became more aggressive, and Martin, drunk and terrified she may be attacked, vomited in the man's car. This individual then bundled her out of the car and drove off, leaving her to stand on the pavement. And one author, David Leslie, has claimed that Martin's daughter could be the one indubitable link to the identity of Bible John.
Because of the DNA.
Could be. We might see someday.
I also just like the idea that she just was like, oh yeah, another murder guy. Oh boy, better just vomit on him. And it worked. The fact that it worked. Anytime you're in it with a serial killer, just vomit on him. Works every single time.
The next one was John Irvine McInnes. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. In 1996, Strathclyde police exhumed the body of John Irving McInnes from a graveyard in Stonehouse, South Lanarkshire. He had served in the Scots Guards and committed suicide in 1980 at the age of 41 by severing a brachial artery in his upper arm. He was the cousin of one of the original suspects in the Bible John investigation. A DNA sample was taken from his body for comparison with semen samples found on the stockings belonging to Helen Puttock, which had been used to strangle her. The results of the testing proved inconclusive, with then Lord Advocate Lord Mackay stating that insufficient evidence existed to link him to the murder of Helen Puttock. The Crown officially cleared McInnes of any involvement in the Bible John murders in 1996. Our best suspect, Peter Tobin. Several criminologists and investigators have speculated that convicted serial killer Peter Tobin may have been Bible John. He was convicted in May 2007 of the 2006 murder of a Polish student, Angelika Kluk, who had been raped, beaten, and then stabbed to death. At the time, he had been working as a handyman under the alias Pat McLaughlin at the St. Patrick Church in Anderton, Glasgow, and he placed Angelica under the floorboards of the church. He had relocated from Shettleston, Glasgow to England in August 1969 before the final two murders were committed by Bible John, and after marrying his first wife, whom he had met at the Barrowland Ballroom in 1968. From August 1969, Tobin lived in Brighton for 20 years, and from the late 1980s, he would alternately reside in either Scotland or the south of England. Tobin had been in his mid-40s when he committed the 1991 murder of two teenage girls whose skeletonized bodies were subsequently unearthed in the garden of his home in Margate, Kent in 2007. He was convicted of these murders alongside that of Kluk between 2007 and 2009. Commencing serial murderous offenses of an extremely calculated nature at such an age is unusual, although not heard of for a male. Furthermore, the fact that Tobin had attacked Kluk with such violence, then hidden her body before absconding to London prior to his subsequent arrest in addition to the abduction, restraining and concealment known to have been exhibited upon the two 1991 murder victims unearthed from the garden of his Margate home, did not suggest the work of an amateur in any of these three cases. However, one discrepancy is that Bible John displayed his victims' bodies in public places where Tobin buried his known victims.
He could have changed his MO.
Yeah. Either way, he got arrested for killing someone, which he did, so.
Well, and it is possible somewhat to change your MO. I mean, you still keep some of it, but there is the idea that the violence can sometimes escalate and can sometimes change over time. So it's always possible. Some contemporary visual similarities exist between Peter Tobin when aged in his 20s in the 1969 composite drawing of Bible John, although the composite drawing showed Bible John with red hair and contemporary pictures of Tobin showed he did not have this hair color. In addition, all three of Tobin's former wives have given accounts of being repeatedly imprisoned, throttled, beaten, and raped at his hands, and each has stated that he had been driven to extreme physical violence by the female menstrual cycle, which was a factor long suspected as investigators as the perpetrator's actual motive behind the murders. In addition, Tobin is known to have been a staunch Roman Catholic with strong religious views, and the alias Bible John may have been given to Jean Langford and Helen Puttock in 1969, is similar to one of the pseudonyms known to have been regularly used by Tobin, which was John Semple.
Oh, like John Simpleton.
Uh-huh.
Huh.
Criminologist David Wilson actively investigated Tobin's case for 3 years and strongly believes the available evidence supports his theories that Tobin is Bible John. He has stated from the moment he believed Tobin was Bible John occurred during Tobin's trial for the 1991 murder of 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, one of the women whose bodies had been found in his Margate garden. The circumstantial evidence which Wilson used to support his theory includes striking similarities between trial testimony from an acquaintance of McNichol's who had been in her company on the evening of her abduction and the conversation with Bible John that Jean Langford claimed to have had on the evening of her sister's murder. Among the important points of overlap are both men mentioning that they did not drink at Hogmanay and having a cousin who had once scored a hole-in-one in a golf match. This information, alongside with other circumstantial evidence, has led Professor Wilson to state, "I didn't set out to prove Tobin was Bible John, but I would stake my professional reputation on it."
Wow.
Although DNA testing has been used to clear several suspects, detectives believe that obtaining a forensic link between Peter Tobin and any of the murder victims linked to Bible John is unlikely due to the deterioration of physical samples owning up to poor storage. As a result of a police investigation named Operation Anagram, which was initiated in 2006 to trace the movements of Tobin throughout the decades and to determine his potential culpability in any other crimes.
Because they're relatively certain that this dude killed before.
Oh, they know he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a woman who informed investigators that she had been raped by Tobin after she met him at the Barrowland Ballroom in 1968, shortly after the first of the murders known to have been committed by Bible John. Another woman told detectives in 2010 that she had endured a threatening experience with Tobin at the Barrowland Ballroom, claiming that Tobin had introduced himself as Peter before pestering her to go with him to a party in the city's Castle Milk area. When this woman viewed pictures of Tobin dating from the late 1960s and early 70s, she stated, quote, "He was the man who came up to me so many years ago in the Barrowlands. I am 100% certain that Tobin is Bible John." Tobin, however, has been eliminated as a suspect by police. Although often reported that Tobin moved from Glasgow to Brighton after the 1969 murders, he in fact relocated from Glasgow to Brighton with his fiancée, Margaret Mortenay, before the second murder attributed to Bible John. Operation Anagram discovered that Tobin was in Brighton at the time of the final two Bible John murders. He had married his first wife in Brighton on the 6th of August, 1969, 10 days before the August 16th murder of Jemima MacDonald, as recorded on their marriage certificate. Tobin's wife also testified that the pair were still on their honeymoon in Brighton at the time of the murders of the second victim, and she insists he was with her at the time. Tobin was also in police custody regarding an unrelated crime when another of the killings occurred. He was also living in Brighton at the time of the third murder, meaning he would have had to travel without his wife's knowledge to Glasgow and back from Brighton to have committed the murder of Helen Puttock. Tobin's DNA was checked against the semen sample for Bible John as part of Operation Anagram. The results of this analysis conclusively proved that the bodily fluid did not source from Tobin, so ruling him out. The doubts surrounding the DNA evidence notwithstanding, the police also have a record of the bite mark that was found on Helen Puttock's body, which they can cross-check with Tobin's dental records, as has been done with John McInnes when he was exhumed and subsequently eliminated as a suspect in 1996. David Swindle, the senior investigating officer in charge of Operation Anagram, has stated that there is no evidence to link Tobin to the Bible John murders, and the Operation Anagram eventually discounted the theory. Swindle had previously presided over the 2002 review of the Bible John murders 4 years before the initial discoveries of the Tobin murders. Although Professor David Wilson claimed in his 2010 book, The Lost British Serial Killer, that Bible John was Tobin, his co-writer for the book, Paul Harrison, later recanted on the claims that they made in the book. In 2013, Harrison published a book instead claiming that Bible John was a police officer, which I think is interesting. No further victims were killed in Scotland or elsewhere in the United Kingdom have ever been conclusively attributed to Bible John, and the manhunt for this murder was one of the most extensive manhunts in Scottish criminal history. The murders of the three women remain unsolved, although the case remains open, with many investigators remaining certain that the perpetrators of these crimes were highly likely to have been shielded by one or more individuals whom he had known. No uniform consensus exists that the three killings were actually the work of the same person, and it has been claimed that the gap of 18 months between the first two killings is unusual for a serial killer, and that the later two murders may have been either copycat killings or the sole two committed by the same perpetrator. Criticism has also been levied against the police for potentially hampering their own investigation by prematurely jumping to the conclusion that all three murders had been committed by the same person. In 2004, police announced their intentions to genetically test a number of men in a further attempt to identify the perpetrator, with all individuals concerned being requested to submit blood samples. This endeavor followed the previous discovery of an 80% genetic match from the semen samples retrieved from the final crime scene attributed to Bible John, with the DNA sample retrieved at the site of the minor crime committed 2 years earlier. The sample was enough of a match to lead officers to believe that the person who committed the offense was related to the killer. And the sole witness ever to have engaged in a lengthy conversation with Bible John, Jean Langford, died in September of 2010 at the age of 74. Langford had given police the description used to form the second composite drawing created of the suspect, which remains the most significant clues to the perpetrator's existence. And despite Professor Wilson's assertion that Peter Tobin may have been Bible John, when Jean Langford discussed her sister's murderer many decades later, she dismissed this theory, stating emphatically that Tobin had not been the man with whom she had shared a taxi with on the night of her sister's murder. And that is the unsolved story of Bible John.
Bible John.
It sounds like a superhero who just spouts Christian rhymes at you, but as it turns out, a serial killer.
I've always been fascinated with this story. Like I said, I've heard this about at least 3 times before.
And the dude stopped in the area.
Right.
So, yeah. Usually with a serial killer, they have to keep going.
Right. But he completely stopped. There were no more murders they attributed to him. I find it fascinating that his victims all had the same thing. They had a child. They were menstruating, and he killed them. Mm-hmm. Was it because he tried to rape them and they claimed they were menstruating, please don't, or he tried to have sex with them and they said, no, I can't because I'm menstruating. I don't know what it is, but that seemed to anger him.
That seemed to set him off.
Absolutely.
Which is what set off Peter Tobin, which is why but you have to discount him at least for one of those murders because he was in police custody.
Correct.
During one. Now, the thing with the wife, you know what? Scotland and England, they're not that, they're not that far apart.
Sure. Sure.
It would be like us going to Amarillo. We can drive to Amarillo without a problem and back in a day.
Right.
It's a long day, but we can do that.
Right. Yeah, it's just, it's fascinating. We're over 50 years later. We don't have any answers on this. I don't know, DNA analysis now, if they're going to exhume some bodies and try to get some more, but they did say that for now, the physical evidence is too deteriorated to be able to do anything with it.
Well, I mean, they didn't know to keep that stuff for, 30 years. Oh, yeah, we'll keep it in a fridge in this cup for, it'll be fine for 4 or 5. But they're not thinking of keeping it for
50 years.
50 years, yes,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's also very hard to keep a body for 50 years.
Yes. Even samples of a body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as time goes on, those samples degenerate. They lose the ability to get any traceable evidence from them. So
worst case is that they rot and they stink out the fridge and corrupt the rest of the samples too.
So this may be one that is never solved, but this was a very haunting one for me. For a long time. I was I like I said, hearing it before, it was something that I wanted to cover because it was a very haunting one for me and one that just kind of kept going in my brain. So cool. So thanks for taking that journey with me this week.
Well, thank you, sir.
That'll take us to the end of our recording week. As always, please do remember you can find more information about us on our website, nerderyandmurdery.com. You can find links to everything we talked about today, as well as pictures. You can also find the link to our social media, where if you want to contact us, let us know information that you want to hear, any stories you want us to cover, or things that you would like us to not do. Please do send that information in.
Please do. We always want to get better.
You can find the link to our merchandise, where if you want to get your Nerdery and Murdery fandom merchandise, you can go there. If you wish to donate support to the show to help keep us going, you can also find the link to our Patreon. As a reminder, from our Patreon, not only do you get all of our episodes ad-free, but we have exclusive material that is on that is on our Patreon that you'll be able to listen to as well.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. As always, please do remember to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or anywhere that you can leave a review. It really helps us get our contact information out there and helps other people find us that may not have known about us before.
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.